Mishmash! Kitbash Corner!
Hey, today we're doing another Space Marine kit bashing video, and we're going to be tackling the Castellans of the Rift. I'll be real with you, their scheme is probably one of my least favorite color schemes for a Space Marine chapter ever. It has way too many greens, it's a little over-designed, but at the end of the day, I like the Castellans of the Rift. Being that they are almost all Primaris, however, does put a little bit of a dapper on it because, you know, I just don't care for Primaris. But in today's episode, we're going to be kit bashing one as the Doom Guy. Like with almost every single chapter that I cover in this channel, this was something that was requested. So if you have a chapter that you want to see painted on the channel, make sure to leave a comment, and even if I don't get to it immediately afterwards, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to do it. But along with that, make sure to leave a like and hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. For just $3 a month, you get to see my videos early, and for $5, you get access to a weekly Q&A in which I'll showcase your models. You also get exclusive roles and channels within the Mishmash Discord, and above everything else, it just really helps me out. Huge thank you to my channel members. You guys are amazing. And if you want to help the channel further, you can use my affiliate links in the description for all sorts of different products that I use on the channel. This, of course, being Wargames Atlantic, Galeri, Chronicle Games, and you can use my discount codes to get some better prices on some great products. But enough of the promotional stuff, I think it's about time we rip and tear into the Castellans of the Rift. Like with all the other Space Marine chapters we cover on the channel, I want to go over a little bit of their lore. The Castellans of the Rift are a relatively new Space Marine chapter, as they were founded during the Ultima founding. They're successors of the Ultramarines, and are most well known for their ongoing battles with the forces of chaos, this mainly being demonic war machines and renegade knights. Being that they're an Ultima founding chapter, they are almost entirely Primaris Marines, which of course, not exactly my cup of tea, and probably a big hitter for old school 40k fans on whether or not they like these guys, but they are carried heavily by their lore. And when the G-Man himself personally picks your chapter to stand guard over one of the worst warp tears in the galaxy, you best believe that this chapter is comprised of brick shithouse, mudhole-stomping, death-craving, lunatic sons of bitches of which the Chaos Gods have never seen. Grey Knights players coping and seething, maybe not because of the Castellans of the Rift, maybe because of the, But more on the ending thoughts of the Castellans of the Rift, I think it's fair to say that a chapter that fights Chaos Space Marines, Demons, and Chaos Knights every single day, 24/7 without any help, and not being completely wiped out, is a feat that is very rare to see. I know some people will go to the Space Marine favoritism, but they're the poster boys for a reason. I'm sorry. They're just damn cool, and I do have to say I've always had an appreciation for chapters that are lesser known but primarily propped up by their fanbase. But now that I've given you a little rundown on the Castellans of the Rift, let's get to the kit bashing. Now to start things off, I'm utilizing a body from the Hellblasters kit. This sassy pose just reminds me a lot of the original Doom cover art. To start things out, I decided to utilize the Scout Arms, as I've already kind of done this in off-screen stuff that you'll see later on the channel. I really like how the Scout Arms fit on regular Astartes. It kind of gives you a lot of different options for creating all sorts of different chapters. But I'll get into that later on. For a sidearm, I'm using yet another Scout Arm, but I'm slicing away at the bolt pistol because I just don't like how modern bolt pistols look. To do this, I'm using my X-Acto knife blade, and I highly suggest you don't do this. It's probably not the best idea, but, well, as long as you're careful. I'm not going to show this on screen, but the blade did not work out too well in this shot. For his replacement bolt pistol, I'm using one from what I believe is the Old Company Command. Either that or the Devastator's kit. I just really like the idea of a bolt pistol having a scope, and it gives me more of an opportunity to paint on different colors to really spice up the model overall. Because the X-Acto knife blade wasn't enough to completely remove it, I had to utilize my clippers. This just made things a lot easier, and I probably should have done this to begin with, but live and learn. After removing the hand, I would sand things down, and I would dryly fit on the new bolt pistol onto the arm. There's a little bit of a gap, but a tiny bit of sprue goo will help this. It's really not that noticeable once you apply paint too. Considering I decided to go for a black casing on the bolt pistol, you can barely notice it once it's fully built. After a little Tamiya, everything sets in pretty nicely, and more importantly, over the little gap, it's just a good pose overall. I really like this pose, it's intimidating, it's very fitting for the original Doom guy, and I'm just a sucker for old Astartes weapons. I feel like I say the same thing in every single episode when it comes to Space Marine stuff, but I don't know. There's a lot of new people that watch these videos, so I might as well spout my same sentiments over and over again. I'm sorry if you watch my content a lot. I know I repeat myself. But once the arms are fully attached, I would apply 2 basic bitch pauldrons to the Marine. The Castellans of the Rift are one of those chapters that does kind of fall into the classic Astartes look in my opinion. Mostly because the Castellans of the Rift are a relatively new chapter, they were only officially added in 2017. So the only art we really have of them is all Primaris. But in a way, I think this works well for them because it does distinguish them from other anti-demon chapters similarly to the Exorcists and even the Grey Knights like I mentioned previously. All the more reason why this is a chapter entirely comprised of Doom guys. But to add on even further to the miniature, I decided to spruce up his base a little bit with some cork. I have very thin cork, I kind of prefer this over thicker cork because it just allows me to add on to my leisure in terms of the overall design of the rocks. However, I'm not going super crazy, I'm just stacking a couple of pieces and spreading on any of the extra chunks that I peel off around the base itself. But once these 2 pieces are set together, I would add in one final detail in the form of a bloodletter skull. At first I was tempted to buy an entire box of bloodletters just to have them crawling up the base itself, but no, I don't want to. Plus I got the stupid skull set to begin with ages ago and I might as well use them. But you may be wondering, what did I use for his noggin? Well, 2 things. I ended up using this Infiltrator's helmet, as it's kinda perfect for classic Doom guy. But you'll also notice I did a sub-assembly, hence why the only footage I have of the helmet, before anything building related, is it's already primed. And as you can probably guess, we're kinda just skipping right into the painting. Sorry about that. Not usually how we do things, but I just filmed this incorrectly, I guess. After a zenithal prime of the helmet and the body, I decided to wash the helmet armor using a 2-to-1 mixture of Oblivion Blackwash and Archaic Sepia from 2 thin coats. It's kind of reminiscent of Marine Juice, as I ended up actually watering this down quite a bit as I didn't want to stain it too much. The Zenithal Prime actually carries this portion of the armor very well, and I would actually say that you don't really need to do anything else. This is kind of perfect, especially if you're going for tabletop standard. While the shade dries, I'd move on to the main portion of the armor, and for this, I am spraying over using Skarsnik Green. I'll tell you now, I did say earlier I don't care for how this scheme looks, but I did not care for painting it either. Mostly because I think I overestimated just how much my airbrush would carry this. Spraying over the Zenithal Prime with Skarsnik Green seemed like a good idea, but I probably should have sprayed over first using Deathguard Green. I don't know. I still like how it turned out in the end, but it was not an easy scheme to pull off. Once the paint dries, I then began shading the entire model using Athonian Camo Shade. This is a bit of an older paint of mine because I prefer the older mixes, but it's still an 8-year-old pot, so the staining was a little undesirable in some areas. Not the end of the world, I prefer dirty Marines anyway, but I think the best bet was maybe using something from 2 thin coats. There was a few snags with this paint job, if you can't tell by this point. Now for the trim of the pauldrons, I decided to use Dark Angel's Green. Again, this is a bit of an older mix, and it didn't apply as smoothly as it probably could have if it were a newer pot. Still, in the end, it does work out as a good tertiary color for the greens, because these guys have way too many goddamn greens. I know I'm complaining early because we're only on the 2nd green, but the last green I use is probably the most frustrating because of how thin it is. Whatever, I'm gonna shape up, I'm gonna stop bitching and moaning. Especially since I'm taking a detour from the greens anyway, and I'm painting the knee pad as well as all the little coils and weapons with some black. We'll also be painting this on the power pack, but I don't really feel like I need to film that portion. Alright, 3rd green, back to bitching. I had to use Ogren Camo for the main portion of the pauldrons, and this took a lot of coats. I believe this was roughly 4 coats, and that was just to get an opaque finish. A big reason for this was my fault because I did spill some of the Dark Angel's Green. Nobody's forcing me to paint this chapter again, I did it once, and I can be done with it. You're lucky that you're a cool chapter. But moving on to the flesh, this is where things get really fun because I quite enjoy painting flesh. I ended up using medium rust from AK Interactive as a base coat. It's a rather intense color for a flesh tone, but being that it is a base coat, we'll be mixing this along with other colors to really make it pop out. I know a lot of Space Marine enjoyers really hate painting flesh for whatever reason, and I think a lot of this is because it's intimidating. But once you get the hang of it, I can tell you personally it's really enjoyable. Maybe I'll make a sequel to my old flesh painting tutorial from ages ago. I don't know, leave a comment if you want to see that. But after the medium rust has dried, we'll then be layering over the main portions of the muscles using a mixture of brown rose and a light touch of deep brown from AK Interactive as well. This is where things start to pop together, but we'll blend things so it doesn't look as awkward. It does look a little cartoony, yes, but that's kind of the appeal. But once we've officially layered over everything on the main portions of the muscles, I would use a little bit of water and a touch more of the deep brown to essentially blend the colors together to create a nice medium tone for the overall flesh. You can see in some areas the medium rust undertone really does shine through, mostly just to make the musculature look a little bit more defined, but that's exactly what we're going for. Things get a little bit more intense when we're painting the head, because it's not as much detail to work with. Had it been a bare head, we could do all sorts of details and it would be a lot easier. But since he's mostly armored, this is a little bit more difficult, hence why I'm basically just going in with the layering. You'll probably notice for the eye sockets, I'm leaving it mostly intact, but only slightly highlighting the eyelids, just to make them pop out a little bit more. You can leave this bare and it would look just fine. I just really enjoy painting flesh. Next, for the Aquila as an undertone and all the leather portions on the model, including the gloves and the holster, I am painting this using mahogany from Acryl. I'm telling you now, if you hate painting leather, this paint is a cheat code. I also decided to apply this to the hair, though I did mix in just a touch of warm brown. Next, for the Aquila and all the little gold pendants, I decided to use bronze from Acryl. Kinda going for the typical thing that I always do with my golds. I always like base coating with this color anyway. But I don't know, the gold is always different depending on the depiction. To begin the highlighting process of the green, I begin re-highlighting using pure Scarsnick green just to get that color back in the main fold. While that dries, I then begin painting all the metallic areas using dark silver. This including the weapons and the mouthpiece on the helmet. Then to shade all the metallics, including the Aquila, I'll be using a mixture of Oblivion Black Wash and Battle Mud Wash 1:1. Super simplistic, and yes, I might be a little lazy to just use one shade over everything, but this mixture is kind of my favorite, and taking a few shortcuts doesn't hurt anybody. Plus, we'll be using this over the leather as well. Usually I don't cover how to paint leather because it's already something that I've covered several times before, but I kind of made it a necessity for this scheme. Now switching gears back to the flesh tone. To highlight the raised surfaces of the flesh, I mixed together light flesh with brown rose, roughly 3:1, and I would glaze this over very slightly. As you can see, I'm actually introducing a little bit more brown rose over these highlights, just to kind of mix them together. Now you probably are guessing at this point this is a little light for what we're going for, and it is a bit of a jump. But yet again, we are going to be doing a slight glaze to really blend this all together. For now, I'm just focusing on painting this over the raised surfaces, and it is a little difficult when painting over the musculature, or I guess rather the veins, because that's really where it kind of differentiates things. Usually when we think of raised surfaces, we just think of the muscles, but the veins kind of complicate things. But thankfully, the glaze that we'll apply later on will make this work all the more. Next, to go back to highlighting the armor, I'm going to be using Scarsnick Green 1:1 with Nurgling Green. These are a little bit starker because the previous mixture that we used to kind of reintroduce the Scarsnick Green just wasn't strong enough. This will kind of bring things back together, and yes, they are thick highlights. I did kind of want to go for a cartoony style. However, we do have one final highlight to complete later on. Once those highlights are picked out, I decided to attach the head, and now we can get back into painting the rest of the model. Now for the leather, I'll be highlighting over the raised surfaces using warm brown from Acryl. I'll just be picking up on the raised surfaces, and like I said with the mahogany, these two colors combined really do kind of just cheat code all leather. You don't even really need to do a final highlight if you don't want to. I think this looks fine as is. But to kind of finish off the leather, I do highlight them on the raised surfaces one final time by mixing together the warm brown with the medium rust. Next for his chainsword, I decided to give it a red casing because I wanted to give him that classic red and checker pattern color. I found a couple depictions with these guys having red casings for their weapons, so I thought it'd be cool. And to finish off the skin, I'm going to be glazing in a very, very light glaze of a little bit of burnt red mixed with the brown rose. This is essentially 1-to-1, and I'm using quite a lot of water as I don't want to tone things down too much. Not only does this tie the skin tone together, it also settles nicely in the recesses, giving us a brutish and heroic flesh tone. But now that we're done with that portion, we can then move on to the decals. This sucks. I decided that it would be a good idea to use the chains from my World Eaters decal sheet from 30K. I also forgot what a pain in the ass these decals are to work with. However, combining this decal along with a basic bitch skull makes the chapter badge perfect for the most part. However, it doesn't stretch the entirety of the pauldron. To alleviate this, I actually ended up slicing another decal and just simply adding onto it. However, it's pretty blatantly clear that I did not center this as well as I could have. So as a result, it is a little wonky, but adding in some bullet holes to make it look a little less wonky is kind of a necessity. Plus, I like battle damage. Yeah, it works out well for me. Once the decal is fully applied, I'm pretty chuffed with it. Though there are some areas that I think could be better, it's not the end of the world. Should also mention too, I did end up shading the pauldrons using a little bit of the sepia, as I did want to kind of add a little bit more definition to the overall design and the bullet holes in the color. This also just nicely ties together a decal with the overall model. Now that we're on the home stretch, I'm going to be highlighting the gold using some rich gold from Acryl. I don't really use this color too often, but it is pretty perfect for what I'm going for in terms of the gold colors. And going back to the pauldron, I'm re-highlighting using Ogren Camo on the raised surfaces, and I'm mostly picking out the little details. I didn't really think it was that imperative to highlight this all that much, mostly because I think the decal kind of speaks for itself. But it is still necessary as it'll look really flat if I don't. Also, as a final highlight to the overall armor, I am adding in pure Nurgling green all around, and I'm going to be painting in my classic scritchy scratchy chips. This way I can add in the detail that I want to really make it stand out, as whenever I'm not feeling confident in a scheme overall, this just kinda is my band-aid or my rug. I don't know. It still looks cool regardless, so I can't really complain too much. Now to highlight the green on the trim of the pauldrons, around 1-to-1 with dark green-gray from AK Interactive. The green for the pauldrons is kind of all over the place with the depictions. I felt like using a more muted green would make more sense as opposed to a really vibrant green, so this is why I decided to dull things down a little bit. Now to paint the bloodletter skull, this is where things get really fun. I'll first be painting over the entirety of the skull using dark green-brown from Acryl, and I'm making sure to get every single detail. However, to really spice things up, I am actively blending over this color using burnt red from AK Interactive. Mixing these colors together does create a bone color, but it's undoubtedly still quite red, which I don't even really know why I'm saying this out loud. I feel like that's pretty obvious. Regardless, to wet blend even further, I decided to add in some dark ivory from Acryl as well, and I'm sketching this over the broader surfaces. You'll probably notice that though I am sketching over the main surfaces and painting over the main surfaces, I'm not too worried about getting this into the deeper recesses. Reason for this is I want these colors to fully dry together, as though they look stark now, they will mix together really nicely, and once they're fully dried, it will resemble a nice reddish bone color, similar to the innards of a fresh bone. Once the mixture is fully dry, I'll then sketch over the raised surfaces using pure dark ivory, and at this point, this color stands out quite nicely. This is a little experiment that I've never tried before, and I have to say I'm pretty proud of it, considering I think it's a perfect color for bloodletter bones. But now that the skull is finished, I would go over the final details of the mini by adding in a little bit of extra weathering, mostly in the form of some rust stains as well as some oxidization on the Aquila. And of course, to really finish things off, a generous splattering of some demon blood. Not too much, not too little, and with that final detail, I was left with a wonderful Castellan of the Rift. This model is a whirlwind for me, as, like I stated many times in this episode, I don't care for this color scheme, I did not care for painting the main portions of the armor, but I have to say this is one of my favorite Marines I have ever painted on the channel and in general. I love how this guy looks. A huge part of it is, I think, the flesh tones and the overall base design. It really makes it stand out for me, and it made it a lot more fun to actually work on the model. And really, that's what pushed me to really try to hunker down and finish this guy. This was not something that took me entirely too long, all things considered, but it's not something I ever really want to do again. Maybe. No, I don't want to do it again. Usually I end up saying that over most of the Marines I paint, but I think this one is a one and done. Which I'm sure most of you are plenty happy to hear, considering that there's a ton more chapters that I haven't gotten to yet. And again, I will remind you, if there's a chapter you want to see painted and kitbashed on this channel, make sure to speak your voice in the comments. But I've definitely been flapping my beak enough for one video. Like always, if you found this helpful, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share it with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kitbash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.